Hmm. The spirit created matter. The spirit. So that it had something to go through. But after a while, the spirit developed intellectual reasoning. To propagate a knowledge that would bring about certainty. Hence, the spirit fooled itself into believing that matter created the spirit. Let's look at a piece of literature that might help us spirit remember that we created matter, and not the other way around. Let's see. This that I am about to read is secret in the sense that it is difficult to understand. And secret in the sense that only those who have received critical knowledge needed for understanding this type of literature are they have a spiritual man be able to understand this piece of literature that those who have not received the empowerment for this type of literature from a um, lineage guru should not be instructed from this type of literature by those who do not understand its correct meaning. For it's preferable that one should stay away from this literature if one has not had permit for such literature from a recognized lineage guru. There are different lineages, and perhaps one lineage may have a different version of this type of literature compared to another lineage. So that's something to consider. Is this literature of that lineage within your understanding of that literature by way of lineages guru that has, by way of lineage, kept the understanding going so that the guru who has given the empowerment also be given the teachings surrounding this secret mantra, secret mantrayana, vajrayana, secret mantra, or tantra, Buddhist tantra, vajrayana, as opposed to mere Mahayana and Mm. So it is said that Buddhism is can be classified into several vehicles, mm, major vehicles. So you could say it's right into several major lineages, mhm, major branches. So there's at least three major branches discussed. Maybe there's only two, and one of them somewhat splits into another two, making three. So the two major branches, or one can see evidently, making Buddhas these two different branches seem very different, like two different kinds of Buddhisms. But one of them is called Mahayana, the other one is called Hinayana. Oh, Hinayana is unacceptable, unacceptable word. So those of the Mahayana camp invented the term Hinayana to put down the others who were not Mahayana. Mhm. Hmm. So they viewed it as Maha and Hina. So Maha is great or bigger, and Hina be translated as lesser, lower, not so great, or smaller, compare relatively speaking, uh, when comparing, uh, hmm, when comparing what? Comparing one from the other, and maybe placing one above the other. So the Mahayanists are placing themselves above those who are not Mahayanists by way of calling them Hinayanists. So there's Mahayana means Maha means great or higher, maybe. Great what? Yana, Ayana, Ayana, yeah, Maha Ayana, maybe. So I think Ayana means vehicle, not lineage, but vehicle. Hmm. So that maybe at the time that the words were created, Mahayana was a sect, is a subsect, no, or a distinct school of Buddhism, and it felt it was superior to the others, so they came up with the word Mahayana, the great vehicle, and Hinayana, the lesser vehicle, the lower vehicle, referring to those who were not Mahayanists but still Buddhists. Ah, so we've got the right knowledge. We're Mahayanists, and those of the other schools are Hinayanists. They lack something we've got, something like that. So the those of the other schools, when they read what Mahayanists were thinking about them, they said, "No, we're not buying that. We're not gonna call ourselves Hinayanists. We're gonna call ourselves something else." So I guess they started calling themselves, or maybe others referred to them as uh, Theravada, Theravada, something like that. If it suggests the hmm, elders, maybe schools of the elders, or tradition of the elders. That school survived amongst who knows 17 other schools of or sects of Buddhism in ancient India. The other schools were known to have existed by way of literature that happened to talk about them. Among those 17 or so schools, there survived one school that came to be known as Theravada. Maybe they didn't call themselves that at that time, but eventually the, the lineage that might be considered the Hinayana because they're not Mahayanists. They don't buy what the Mahayanists consider to be the literature that should go with, that should be hmm, brought together as the set of all the religious texts that are valid for learning Buddhism. So the Mahayanists have an expanded literature, you could say, compared to the, I will stop saying Hinayanists. I will say Theravadans, or something like that. Those are the Theravada schools. Mm. Mm. Uh, so, what I'm trying to say is that the Mahayana schools or lineages of Buddhism mm, became distinct, and they were self conscious relative to the non Mahayana schools, one of which became known as the Theravada schools. I would say schools because they themselves had to have gotten split a little bit. Well, they you could say that they ended up moving out of India and into an island off of India called Ceylon or Sri Lanka. So they got pushed out of India into that island, and from that island they sailed. They sailed on, Ceylon sailed on to other places like Burma or Myanmar. That's kind of east and somewhat north. Yes, east of Bangladesh and a little bit north. And then even farther east and kind of south into Thailand and Laos, Cambodia, Khmer Rouge, Khmer Rouge, something like that. Not quite into Vietnam. Vietnam got a strong lineage of Mahayana. Perhaps it came from China. So, yeah, from India, Mahayana went on to China, Korea, Vietnam, Japan, and so on. Oh, of course, Indonesia, Sumatra. Perhaps the that kind of Buddhism did not stay there forever because maybe Indonesia, the Buddhism got replaced with Islam. Uh, and it also happened in places like Pakistan and Afghanistan. It got replaced with Muslim religions and maybe Hindu religion. Mostly now Muslim, like, and that goes for Afghanistan and maybe several other stands. I guess stan means land. So there's Afghanistan, Pakistan, Pakistan, Tajikistan. What else? There's, they're around Central Asia. Mhm. So yeah, in from India in Nepal, Buddhism went to China, and in South India, Buddhism jumped over to Sri Lanka, and from Sri Lanka it went to Burma, mm, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. Mm. So that's so that region from yeah yeah Sri Lanka, Burma, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand. It be, it became strongholds of Theravada Buddhism as opposed to Mahayana Buddhism, which became prominent in China, Korea, Vietnam, Japan, Sumatra, Indonesia, before the Mongols took over. Um, and on the other side of India, the west side, northwest side, what is now Pakistan and Kashmir, Afghanistan, and maybe even as far west as Iran, Iraq, the Middle East, Egypt, ancient Greece. Oh. Perhaps it got absorbed into the Hellenistic world so that would become unnoticeable. Hmm. What distinguishes Mahayana from Theravada? Well, the the two types of literature. Oh, one distinguishing remark is that the Mahayana literature was based, or not necessarily based, but that type of literature got written down or translated to the language of Sanskrit, but not the Hindu Sanskrit, more like a variant that you could say, hmm, maybe you could call it Buddhist Sanskrit. Maybe it's called Buddhistic Sanskrit, Buddhic, Buddhist variant of Sanskrit. Dialect? Buddhist dialect of Sanskrit? Uh, Whatever it's referred to, yes, the literature of the Mahayana mm, was first written down for the most part in Sanskrit. Maybe before that, it was written down in something like what we know as Pali, the Pali language. But the literature that was written down in Pali became known as the literature of the Theravada traditions, right? So you could think of Pali as the as coming from Sanskrit. You could call it like a colloquial version of Sanskrit. You could say. Hmm. You could think of it as we have Latin, the ancient or classical language that we know as Latin, and compare it to Italian, and you could say that, oh, that's very interesting. It looks like Italian comes from Latin. In the same way, you could say that Pali comes from Sanskrit. Perhaps Pali, or an earlier version of Pali, was spoken by the people. It, and Sanskrit was mm, not quite spoken by the people. It became the language for writing things up in a classical way, in a way that would show authority to the people. The language of the elites. Mhm. Well, it was certainly the language of the Brahmins, the Brahmin priests, the language of Brahmanism, the language that was used to memorize uh, the texts used by the Brahmin priests. Hmm. Hmm. So, what's going on here? How come my face looks different? Let's see. Done. Oh, there I am. Okay. Let me flip over to YouTube, see if I look like that. Uh-huh. Oh, it doesn't look like. There I am. Yeah, come on, flip that way. Which way's right? Okay, yeah, that's right. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. So, uh, Hmm. Okay. So it's talking about Mahayana and Theravada as two distinct lineages of Buddhism, major lineages. Sometimes you could say traditions of Buddhism or schools of Buddhism. Hmm. So Mahayana schools are distinct from Theravada schools in that the language used to preserve their literature is Sanskrit compared to the Theravada school, who, whose literature was preserved in what became known as the Pali language, right? Which maybe you could say it's a colloquial version of Sanskrit. But uh, they came up with some kind of writing system to preserve Pali literature. Or maybe they borrowed the writing system from whatever they were using in Sri Lanka. Who knows when? Mm. So yeah, there you could say that Buddhism got divided into two major lineages based on the language that was used to preserve it. One was preserved in Sanskrit and the other one was preserved in Pali. Hmm. So you could call them the Mahayana schools, the Sanskrit, the Sanskrit language schools of Buddhism, and the Theravada schools, the Pali schools of Buddhism. But another distinguishing mark between the Mahayana schools of Buddhism and the Theravada schools of Buddhism is that in Mahayana schools, there was layer of an additional layer of literature that contained some additional teachings of the Buddha and some hmm, and some teachings that maybe expands upon um, what the Theravada what a Theravada school would offer. So the Theravada school tends to offer the goal of Buddhism maybe being that, yeah, we are traveling towards enlightenment. Maybe that's the ultimate goal of an individual Buddhist, is to become a Buddha. But it seems so far removed that maybe the best we can do is attain a better rebirth. Perhaps that's the in that sense, Theravada is less ambitious and more like saying, well, let's be more practical and say that we're, it's highly unlikely that we will become a Buddha in this life, so, but we'll do our best to become as best as we can in this life and in the future lives. And maybe support, it'd be good for us to support members in our community who have chosen to become monks. So we should support the monks. And they're you could call them the professional meditators, and and we could think of them as those who are preserving the knowledge of Buddhism and are able to teach it and preach it best, and maybe they should have more time allowed and to also practice meditation. So we should support them. So we'll donate to their monasteries. And so, yes, that was also happening in the Mahayana schools, but they're developed in Mahayana schools, something that maybe gave hope for those who are not monks. You could call them lay people, the lay community, who are supposed to be supporting the monks, the monasteries. You could say that Mahayana is trying to also say that lay people could also be practicing what they can towards becoming a Buddha and going in that direction. Hmm. That there's something in between becoming a Buddha and just having a better rebirth. There's the ideal of the Bodhisattva. So that's an idea that is not so prominent in Theravada. And so, and so, hmm, the idea being that you could hmm, you could become a being that is somewhere in between a Buddha and just a ordinary person, be, being good and taking a better rebirth, you could say. So somewhere in between those extremes, there's a bodhisattva being, and that being is a person who takes a vow that they will become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, and so that uh, in in their adventure towards Buddhahood, they are undergoing a bodhisattva transformation. Mhm. By doing all their actions for the benefit of all sentient beings. By doing all their actions, uh, not just in the hopes of helping others, but in the hope of attaining Buddhahood to be able to better help others. Mm. Oh, sorry. So, so a a Mahayana Buddhist uh, prays and may take a vow that they may become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. They pray that their actions will have a motivation that it be for the benefit of all sentient beings. Mhm. So they're generating bodhicitta. Bodhi is a mind that is awakened. And chitta means mind. So it's bodhicitta is an awakened mind or a mind that strives to become awakened or that is uh, that if it has not realized Buddhahood, it is realizing something in that direction. Uh, hmm. Bodhicitta. You can think of it as a spirit of enlightenment, an attitude that I will save others. I will not just save myself like a Hinayanist would. I will be a Mahayanist. I will save others instead of myself. Like if I'm on the edge of becoming a Buddha, if I take if I jump over, cross over the line to become a Buddha, and I can't go back. I would rather not do that because if I can't go back to help others, instead I will dedicate my life to helping to bring others close to this edge so that then we could all jump over and cross the other side to become Buddhas. Hmm. So the Bodhisattva denies his Buddhahood, and yet he's motivated by becoming a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, but he doesn't quite want to jump over to Buddhahood because he's busy helping others become Buddhas. Yeah, if they can help others become Buddhas and they do become Buddhas, that would be great. But they're gonna stay busy helping others become Buddhas and forgetting about themselves becoming Buddhas. Hmm. Mm, mm. So I was talking about Mahayana and Theravada schools or lineages or traditions of Buddhism. So the Mahayana is distinct by way of language comparatively relative to Theravada schools. So that language for Mahayana literature is Sanskrit, and the language for Theravada is Pali. And also, Mahayana has great emphasis on bodhisattvahood or of a path that you could say it's the way of a bodhisattva. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Theravada, not so much. And now there's actually three major school lineages of Buddhism. It so happens that the Mahayana school further developed another higher level of Buddhism, maybe more secretive level because it was kept secret for the most part, or maybe it was maintained elitist for a while until it became established. It, it mostly became established in, to, in the Tibetan and Himalayan regions, and there was some versions of it that's found in Eastern Buddhisms, like in in Japan. There's the Shingon schools of Buddhism. Shingon. So you could call it an esoteric form of Buddhism. So it appears in Japan and in Korea and maybe China and maybe even Vietnam. And maybe it was there in Indonesia and maybe other places. But maybe it was too good to be true for that time. I don't know. But maybe it maybe it became extinct in other places that you don't see it. So maybe the lands where Theravada ended up in, those lands uh, became more suitable for Theravada, and and perhaps Mahayana and Theravada did not get along. And if there were some Mahayana in a Theravada land, it would it would eventually go extinct. I would think you would have a chance of surviving, perhaps because the Theravada school in a Theravada land got support from a Theravada king. Mm, mm. But yes, there was this additional sub school or sub lineage in Mahayana called, or became known as Vajrayana. Vajra means diamond, indis- or indestructible. Diamond, uh, maybe indestructible because a diamond is considered very maybe the hardest rock and is able to cut through materials. Hmm. And it seems to be indestructible, but not really. But initially, maybe it's indestructible and able to destroy other material. Like if you have a piece of glass and you want to cut it, maybe you would use a diamond cutting tool. So that sh- shows the quality of a diamond that in that it is indestructible. And they're equating that indestructibility to the mind, to the very subtle mind, so that one is indestructible or immortal. Immortal. Mhm. Oh boy. Mm. Mm. So yeah, out of Mahayana, you could say it further divided, or maybe it got specialized into, or out of Mahayana schools, they're developed a more secret kind of Buddhism called Vajrayana. So the Vajrayanists still considers themselves to be Mahayanists at heart. It's just that they developed methods that were kept secret. Powerful methods that could produce Buddhahood in one lifetime. So wow, that's quite a claim that you could become a Buddha in this life. Uh-huh. 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 So in that sense, the Vajrayanist is thinking of themselves as even superior to a regular Mahayanist by saying we are super Mahayanists. We can do it in this lifetime. We can become a Buddha in this lifetime. And we have the technology to do it. That's quite a claim. And they say that it requires careful guru disciple relationship and preferably one on one or one master with a small class of devoted followers and following following the instructions given in users manuals. Mm. Those users manuals contain mantras, mm, pieces of literature that are to be repeated often and all the time, uh, that help mm, generate tremendous power to become a Buddha in this lifetime. Mm. Mm. Where am I? So the Vajrayanist is a sub subgroup of Mahayanists. The Vajrayanists consider themselves to be Mahayanists, but with a special technology that will send one to Buddhahood in this lifetime. And that technology is Tantra. It involves mantras. So there's uh, there's Mahayana, Hinayana, and under Mahayana there's a subgroup called Vajrayana. Sometimes it's also called Secret Mantrayana. Secret secret mantra. Yana means vehicle. You could think of vehicle as lineage or tradition or school, but maybe hmm, vehicle is better. That's what it means literally in Sanskrit, supposedly. So Vajrayana has other, you could say, synonyms. Mm, could be called, instead of Vajrayana, it could be called secret mantra or mantrayana, mm, or tantra, tantric Buddhism, esoteric Buddhism. So maybe it's elitist Buddhism. Maybe it's secret in that they use the word secret to suggest it's special, it's elite, it maybe it attracts people to it by way of calling it secret. And in that you can only learn about it if you become empowered, get an empowerment from a lineage guru, and you will learn the secrets from that guru, and you will follow a manual, a piece of literature, a tantra, perhaps. And perhaps you could call it a prayer book, a sadhana, practice manual. It's got all the prayers in the right order and what you have to visualize and what mantras to say that represent that particular deity. Deity? What? Deity? What's that mean? God? Goddess? A deity, yes. But I thought Buddhism doesn't believe in God. Well, Buddhism has lots of gods. It doesn't believe in a creator God, in one supreme God that's controlling everything, that created everything. So it's saying that we do that. We are our own gods. We create and control everything. But there are deities, and what are those deities? Maybe they're maybe they're archetypes of maybe they're kinds of Buddhas that we wish to become, or personalities of Buddhas expressed as deities, as gods or goddesses. So in this secret mantra vehicle or tantra or tantric Buddhism or esoteric Buddhism, uh, developed in India, maybe more than 1,000 years ago. Well, developed secretly by the Buddha, and so there's a secret lineage involved. And it didn't appear in the Theravada school, or maybe it was suppressed or removed from the Theravada school, so it doesn't show up. Hmm. So that in the Vajrayana schools of Buddhism, which ended up being preserved and developed in Tibet and in the Himalayan regions. Yes, thus the where you could say it comes from. So the literature is written in instead of Sanskrit. Well, it does have some Sanskrit. The mantras are kept in Sanskrit, but the primary language involved in writing it down eventually became, maybe it got translated from Sanskrit, but eventually it appeared as Tibetan. That's the language used, Tibetan language used to preserve it. And the teachers, the lamas, the gurus are from Tibet. So, yes, Tibet was important in preserving this kind of Buddhism, maybe developing it further. But it did come from India, maybe northwest India, or like Kashmir, Afghanistan areas, but also in the Bengal areas and in Nepal. So there's Guru Padmasambhava Rinpoche, Guru Rinpoche. So he's one that brought and taught Vajrayana in Tibet. Mm. But then there's the yoga traditions of like Tibet's Milarepa. And there's Atisha, Dipankara Srijnana. hmm Out of that came the Lamrim, right? And Dampopa and his Lamrim, and Lama Tsongkhapa and his Lamrim. The Lamrim Chenmo. But on top of that, there was some secret literature being processed and practiced. That literature designed to take one to Buddhahood and involves secret methods that you would best learn it from a guru, carefully guided you through it. So, an example we'll be looking at this type of literature now that I've got everyone bored and sleeping, so I can read it to myself. And that will keep it secret because nobody will get to this part of the video alive. They're all sleeping, so nobody's going to watch this. So I can read it to myself. That will keep it as a guarded secret. So I will read from that type of literature a Vajrayana or esoteric form of Buddhism, a secret mantra type of literature. It's literature that is to be practiced, to be memorized, and to be a little bit of reading it loud, but eventually of think reading it silently in one's mind, or maybe perhaps reciting the mantras out loud. Maybe not. Maybe you could also recite them silently after a while. Maybe you recite it once out loud and then start reciting it silently. So, going to be reading from such types of literature to reveal the title of this one particular literature. It has its own lineage and its own masters from Tibet. But remember, it came from India eventually. One should think of it as coming directly from not merely Guru Padmasambhava, but Guru Buddha Shakyamuni, a tantric version of the Buddha. Maybe you could call him Vajradhara. Maybe Vajrayogini. No, not Vajrayogini, but Vajrapani. Hmm. Here he goes. I'm going to read the comment. If you haven't, I'm going to read the title and then read through it. If you haven't had an empowerment, then turn this video off. You have to know what empowerment you haven't had first. So here's the title. It's of this booklet, of this practice, of this sadhana. It's called the Vajra Yogini Sadhana in commentary. And it's by who? By Geshe Ngawang Dargye. Or maybe I should say Geshe Ngawang Dargye. No, I'll say Geshe Ngawang Dargye. And it was translated by Alan Wallace. Wow. And let's look at the back of the book. It says Vajrayogini Sadhana in commentary. It's a translation of an oral explanation given by Geshe Nawang Darje in Seattle, Washington in 1981. Seattle, Washington, the state of Washington, not Washington, D.C., the state of Washington, that's way up west, northwest, and touching Canada on the coast, on the west coast. Seattle, yes. Nice city. So, traditionally, practice of Tantra is is supposed to be kept secret, and it is to be noted that this book is intended purely for those who have received the proper initiation. However, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama has advised, the great misunderstandings to which Tantra is often subject to are more harmful than the partial lifting of such secrecy. So there is a necessity for books to be made available which contain authentic explanations. So, in other words, what this is saying is that, yeah, you're supposed to keep this secret. You're supposed to not be able to read and practice on your own this type of literature because you don't know what it means, because you haven't had the empowerment, because you haven't had the lineage teachings, because you haven't had a qualified guru that has spent years studying this type of literature and practicing it. So you shouldn't be reading this because you may have misunderstandings about it, and that makes it more harmful. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama is saying that maybe we should try to get qualified writings by masters that understand this practice, this literature. Yes, we should have commentaries by masters be published and be available to the public so that the the so that the understanding of the practice is available, and we should uh, not think of it as revealing secrets. Maybe it is in the end, but we're trying to reveal not merely the secrets by themselves. We should be trying to provide commentary that makes the practice understandable. So this. So, in other words, the Dalai Lama is saying that misunderstandings are more harmful than just merely revealing the secrets of the Tantras. So, if we can reveal a great understanding of the Tantra, then that would be greater than just merely revealing the Tantra as is. So, along with revealing the Tantra as it is, we should provide good commentary. And so, this pamphlet does not merely have the Tantra in its original language translated into English, but it comes with the necessary commentary to provide correct understanding of the meaning of the practice. And the correct understanding is provided here by the Venerable Geshe. Geshe means like PhD level of Buddhism. Geshe, in other words, that he had studied a lot. Geshe, and his real name is after the word Geshe. So his real name is, or his accepted Dharma name, the name he got to be known as, well, as a monk. Well, he died a monk. His name is Nawang Dargye. Geshe Nawang Dargye. He was born in Tibet, in the Kham province of Tibet in 1928. Wow. And attended Saraje Monastery. He escaped from Tibet in 1959 to India, where he was able to continue teaching and meditating. He received his Geshe Larampa degree in 1969. In 1971, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama asked him to teach, could you teach Dharma courses to Westerners at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala? Yes, he agreed to do that for uh, quite a while. So from 1971 to 1970, no, 86. So that must have been 15 years. So in 1986, he stopped doing that because went on to New Zealand to teach there, the city of Dunedin. He was a resident spiritual director at what became known as the Targhee Dharma Center in New Zealand. That's an island off of Australia. Hmm. Until his death in 1996. Oh, so he was there only 10 years more. So he died relatively young, I would say, because 1928, if you subtract 28 from 96, what do you get? 70 or maybe 68 years? 67 years, maybe? Hmm. Anyway, let's see. Mm, uh, when you go inside the book, it doesn't have too many pages. It's 54 pages long. Let's see what do you have inside. You've got a foreword. Mm-hmm. The foreword is 1992. Mm-hmm. Yes, this was first printed in 1992, but it also got printed few more times over the year. Maybe the last time it got printed was in 2019. So it got printed in 1992, 1999, oh no, 2003, 2006, revised 2019. So I think I got the 2019 type version. And so, yeah, it's got a one page forward by Getzo Tsering, director of LTWA. Mm-hmm. LTWA, what's that mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's got a picture of Vajrayogini. Vajrayogini. And then it's got contents. Yeah, okay. It's got an introduction. It's got different yogas, the yoga of sleep, the yoga of rising, the yoga of tasting the nectar, the yoga of immeasurables. That it consists of refuge, taking the three bodies as the path, cultivation of the awakening mind, guru yoga, yoga of self generation, yoga of donning the armor, yoga of purifying sentient beings, yoga of blessing the dakas and the kinis, yoga of verbal and mental recitations. First tangential practice to the completion stage. Second tangential practice to the completion stage. It looks like it's under yoga of verbal and mental recitations. And then there's the inconceivable yoga on page 20, and then yoga of daily activities on page 22, Salk offering retreat, and then page 29 is uncommon inconceivable yoga, page 39, through 44. Page 45 is the appendix, and that's appendix 1, and then there's appendix 2 on page 49, and then prayer to Vajrayogini is within the appendix 2, and the notes, page 51, and bibliography, page 53. Okay, so let's look at the introduction. It's very brief. Then there's the yoga of sleep. It's brief also. Then the yoga of rising. It's brief also. Yoga of tasting the nectar. It's brief also. And then the yoga of immeasurables. Is it's not quite as brief. And then the refuge, and then taking the three bodies as the path. Three bodies of the path. Hmm. Hmm. Maybe it's referring to the truth body, the enjoyment body, and the emanation body. Hmm. And so forth and so on. And it's cultivation of the awakening mind. And then there's Guru Yoga. Mhm. That's really important. And then there's this yoga of self generation. So this is the generation stage practice. hmm So it's very technical. So it tells you what you're supposed to visualize. What what's the meaning of the mantra, maybe, or certain syllables used. And then there's a mantra and explained it. Yoga of donning the armor. That's on page 10. So before that, the yoga of self generation was 2 pages long. The yoga of donning the armor is how long? 2 pages long. The yoga of purifying sentient beings. That's in a page long. The yoga of blessing the dakas and dakinis. Hmm. I'm getting sleepy. I will have to shut down this operation. So I didn't get very far, but I got a summary, like going over the table of contents, kind of a review. I could flip over. Maybe I still have energy to do this. Flip over to the other side and show you the book. It's called Vajra Yogini Sadhana and Commentary by Geshe Nwang Dorje, translated by Ellen Wallace. So it's pretty thin, huh? Maybe 50 pages. So there's the contents. So, so that's what I read. Uh, That's the content. So I read the forward. I didn't read the forward. Oh yeah, maybe I did read the forward. And then there's a image of Vajrayogini, and then an introduction, then the different yogas, briefly mentioned, and yeah, the yoga of the immeasurables, refuge. In other words, taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, maybe in the Guru also. Taking the three bodies of the path could be the Dharmakaya or the truth body, Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. And cultivation of the awakening mind. So that's all in page 2, and that takes 4 pages to go through. Then you start reading about Guru Yoga, the yoga of self-generation, the yoga of donning the armor, yoga of purifying sentient beings, yoga of blessing the Dakas Nakinis, yoga of verbal and mental recitations. The first tangential practice to the contemplation of stage, no, to the completion of stage. Then the second tangential practice to the completion of stage. Inconceivable yoga, yoga of daily activities, sock offering, retreat, civil yoga, and appendix 1 and 2, right to Vajrayogini, names, oh no, notes and bibliography. Uh, so, introduction, thinking that. There's a mention of Jason Couple in there. It was deep as follows, rising, and yoga of tasting the nectar, and yoga of the immeasurables, and the cultivation of the awakening mind, that's bodhicitta, right? And then there's Guru Yoga. And there's the yoga of self-generation. Maybe that's where we start getting more tantric-y. More tantric-y? Maybe where we have to start visualizing things happening in front of us or inside us. There's a mantra in here. Om Sarva Buddha Dakini Vajra Varnaniye Vajra no Vajra Vairochaniye Om 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 Pe 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 Soha. Yoga of donning the armor, yoga of purifying sentient beings, yoga of blessing the dakas and the kinis, yoga of vajra and mental recitations. Yoga of daily activities. Oh, I can't. I cannot handle this anymore. I'm going to have to say good morning because it's 4:34 in the morning, and I'm exhausted. You gotta look at my face. I want to sleep. Let me sleep. Thank you. Hope this helps.